Should you take supplements? Who should take supplements? What type of person? What type of environment? What characteristics does someone need to have to earn the right to take supplements? Well, we're going to go through a variety of different reasons on why supplementation may be an intelligent aid to the average Westerner's life. So, let's get straight into it. The reality is contemporary Western living exposes us to a range of obstacles that put our physiological structures to the test, leaving our bodies frequently depleted more than ever before. And we're going to go into 7 different reasons on how that is the case. Number 1 is genes. Approximately 22% of all the genes that encode for the enzymes that require micronutrients as cofactors, which means the machinery doing work inside your cells actually needs micronutrients to function properly. So these micronutrients, obviously, we take in the form of supplementation when food isn't adequate. These could be enzymes. So basically, the supplements helping us with micronutrients that help with the enzyme production and function that are involved in metabolism, neurotransmitter production, to speed up chemical reactions, to repair damage, basically everything you want to be doing to optimize cellular function. It needs micronutrients. It needs minerals like magnesium, which we find particularly abundant in things like green leafy vegetables. So it's... From a very basic first principles point of view, it's cellular function. It's that the reality is the food that we often intake is not adequate to support the day-to-day demands of the average human being today. And I'm kind of jumping forward a little bit, but to number 7, but let's go there. Low food quantity and variety is really an underpinning of why a lot of people could benefit from supplementation, because look, the reality is that a lot of people aren't getting the requisite nutrient dense foods, ticking food variety boxes, food density boxes, and thus they are depleted, deficient, and insufficient in a variety of cofactors, micronutrients, and minerals that are required for basic genetic function, gene expression, enzyme production, all of these things I just mentioned. So the answer would be, well, of course, get it through your food. You want, eat head to tail, organ meats, variety of fish to get the whole omega spectrum, oysters for high dose of zinc and selenium. We could go on and on about food examples. That's a separate video and conversation about the foods that are most micronutrient dense, but the reality is most people eat muscle meats. They rotate, a handful of vegetables per week. They don't eat seasonally. They don't eat fungi like mushrooms. They don't eat fermented foods. They're not slow cooking their meats, and they're not getting, hydroxyproline and glycine and all these important, amino acids. Numerous examples that we could go on that most people are not ticking those boxes. So until we can establish good food habits, for the meantime, for people who don't have the option to, can't afford to, there's a justification, whatever your reason is, to look at supplemental interventions for people who do get low food variety and low food quantity. Okay, the quantity can be particularly people who they're time poor, they're money poor, they're not getting and ticking those boxes, but maybe one key supplement can help. And so that's the first basis to begin with. I'm going to now go to 4 and 5, actually. Exercise, lifestyle, and stress, because I really think these are the big ones, the big rocks of the justifications to supplement. Next one's being exercise, exercise being a stress, and lifestyle and general emotional cognitive stress that we all go through on a day-to-day basis has never appeared to be more heightened than it is today. And so we have to understand that whether it's physical activity, or whether it's the stress of a busy career 9 to 5, or raising a family with just you and your husband or your wife, or whatever, your partner, that's not how we actually used to raise children. You know, they said a village used to raise raise a child or a tribe. You know, so the stress that parents have to go through today is quite burdensome, not just emotionally, but anytime there's an emotional, cognitive stress, that's a physiological, cellular stress that is depleting and taxing the minerals, micronutrients, and cellular function, and thus, whether it's exercising every day or it's on top of that, what it's exercise, it's career, it's family, it's sleep deprivation stress, it's poor food quality stress, which could be putting a burden on your gastrointestinal tract. It's parasite stress, which is putting a burden on your metabolism and jacking up your metabolic rate, requiring more micronutrients and minerals, because that's another burden. Like, there are so many examples of stresses that we place on our body and that are placed on our body as a result of modern living that could justify the necessity for some smart supplementation. Let's dive into some of the notes here. The amount of energy used for active individuals generally requires far more than the nutritional recommended daily intake for the average population. Indeed, consuming only the stated RDA can actually limit your athletic performance, limit your exercise performance. So if you engage in CrossFit or WODs or triathlons or any high-intensity weightlifting or any type of high-intensity physical activity on a day-to-day consistent basis, your nutrient requirements, one can argue, are going to be quite a bit higher than the recommended daily intake, which is based on average populations. So take that into consideration, that your demands are contextual. And so for the person in this box who is training every day, who is highly stressed, could benefit from some supplementation. Next is lifestyle stress. You know, I talked about the high-paced living puts a physiological burden and requires a lot of nutrients to sustain, particularly, you know, the brain requiring a lot of not just glucose, but there are other factors, like where do you even begin? Like brain being the most calorically hungry organ of the body. Stress will deplete our body of essential minerals like magnesium, electrolytes. You know, we usually would be consuming these through our food and water sources and bathing, though now drinkable water is treated. You know, it's got fluoride in it, it's got chlorine in it. You know, it's rid of many of the trace elements that we get from a natural mineral spring. So we're not going to be receiving a lot of the minerals that we once did, and we're going to be losing a lot through our sweat, particularly sodium. So that's supplementation doesn't have to just come through pill form. It can just be through intelligent, like, can we look at a Celtic sea salt? Can we look at a Himalayan? Can we look at a river salt, you know, of some sort, used on those higher intensity days where we're sweating more, for example? So these are the big rocks and reasons that could justify higher nutrient demands and higher supplementation demands to combat and accommodate for that. Another one is toxins. Each and every day, we're faced with pollutants, air pollutants, depending on the region you live in, particularly Asia, are ridden with air that has a high particulate matter density, which we've seen has negative cardiorespiratory effects, can have downstream consequences on all-cause mortality and basic respiratory function. You know, this puts a burden on our respiratory system. Like, our body engages antioxidant pathways and methylation pathways to fight and combat a lot of the inflammation and stress that we put through our body, and toxins is one of them, whether it's the drinking water or the household chemicals that we use. These types of nutrients are necessary to help shuttle vitamins, mineral, antioxidants. These types of nutrients are necessary to help shuttle toxins through detoxification pathways to prevent or to mitigate the formation of DNA-damaging free radicals, pesticides, herbicides, and chemicals. You know, I should just say pesticides and chemicals found in the modern food supply, combined with low-quality water, environmental contaminants, degraded plastics, airborne pollutants, carbon monoxide. You know, you can leak that, I believe, from like gas heaters, and that happens often in the home. These synergistic factors vastly could increase your need for vitamins, minerals, nutrients to combat the formation of these free radicals that are, for lack of a better word, attacking your metabolism. The reality is, how do you know the degree to which you should supplement? Well, you should look at a full blood panel. You should look at, an omega panel, a Dutch hormone test. You should look at seeing what's actually going on inside your body and not just supplement indiscriminately, right? But there are a couple of supplements that you could safely supplement with and, without blood testing, and probably you'd be smart to do so based if you assessed your lifestyle to be a risk factor, like if you don't get a lot of sun exposure. Vitamin D and K2 is probably going to be a good one, as most people are deficient. Magnesium is probably going to be a great one, as, again, most people don't meet the adequate levels. We're looking at like 50% of the population, Western population. I say US, it's really US, but really, we can apply that to most Western countries. Moving on, soil deficiency. So we forget, what do you think all the plants, vegetables, tubers, potatoes, where do you think all that comes from? Like, they're grown in soil. And whether the UN's estimation of the majority of our topsoil being gone, by 2060, I believe, that having some pretty severe consequences on modern agriculture. But let's just talk about how monoculture, which is monoculture agriculture, where they're tilling the same land over and over again, replanting on the same land over and over again. And so if you've ever grown vegetables, they recommend you actually grow different vegetables seasonally. Well, you have to do that kind of anyway, because most don't grow year round, but on the same land, because the soil is going to be depleted of different minerals depending on the plant growing on it. And what happens when we chuck the same wheat plant on the same crop of land over and over again? And it's very efficient. We get a high yield. However, now we're depleting massive pieces of land and farmable land of the minerals and the microorganisms that they thrived in, that they would thrive in. We're no longer having cows come along and bison come along and poop, eat grass, poop, repeat, move, migrate. Like there's this cycle, that natural cycle that occurs to replenish the soil, but we're not allowing that to happen, except for what a lot of people, some like polyphase farming and regenerative agriculture is trying to accomplish to combat this soil deficiency. Soil deficiency is going to impact the micronutrient, mineral, vitamin content of the foods we eat. One study my coach sent me, I think it was on Brazil nuts, and you could probably find it pretty easily. The massive difference on selenium content of Brazil nuts, we're talking about hundreds of % different in Brazil nuts based on the regions they're grown in. And just an example that we think there's, all right, this is orange. It has a certain average amount of vitamin C. This is an oyster. It has a certain amount of zinc. Well, ideally, yeah, but the conditions to which many of these plants, vegetables, and animals are growing and living in is suboptimal. It's inadequate. Because of modern farming techniques and fertilizers, we're depleting the soils of these nutrients and microorganisms, and they can degrade the nutrient content of the food you eat. Plants grown with modern fertilizer can contain only 25% of the micronutrients of those grown using more traditional farming methods with good soil turnover practices. I don't have a source for that, so you can take that with a grain of salt, or you can look it up. Can't recall. Crucial micronutrients are becoming increasingly difficult to obtain from our food sources. Monocrop agriculture uses, like I said, same land over and over again. This minimizes the quality of the soil and obviously impacts the quality of our produce. And when they don't have many minerals to feed them, we find ourselves with starved produce that cannot nourish us as effectively. Yet another justification to look at smart supplementation in those areas. And not be surprised when I'm eating all these foods, man, but I'm still deficient. Now, just one variable to explain it. There's always many variables to explain. And one of the last ones that's very relevant, physiological mechanism that happens with age, is age-related declines in nutrient absorption. Your ability to absorb micronutrients and even macronutrients like protein actually decreases as you age, particularly protein, because we have less hydrochloric acid production as we age, particularly the elderly. And so their ability to digest protein and assimilate it is decreased. The bioavailability of protein is lessened because of this poorer hydrochloric acid production, which helps it create an acidic state of our stomach. Very important for digesting, breaking down protein, which really relies on a pH that is conducive to an acidic state, a low pH. So that's another reason why supplementation may become even more important for the aging populations, And we should also consider that many medications that we use to treat disease are going to have downstream consequences and deplete and put burdens on many biological processes in the body and can interfere with nutrient absorption. So we need to take in consideration what other things we're intaking that could compete and interfere with the nutrient absorption within a food matrix in a food. Could be yet another reason to look at timing of medication to mitigate that and supplementation. And so, look, those are some major considerations to why supplementation may be important and may be needed, okay? If you're not ticking these boxes, if you're not ticking your food boxes. But let's get it straight. Like, if you're ticking all those boxes with food intake, if we're looking at the most nutrient-dense foods, eating head to tail, organ meats, fish, wide variety of seasonal produce, slow-cooked meats, like, we should be able to tick a lot of those boxes and really manage and mitigate a lot of the supplements we need to invest in. But most people aren't living that. Of course, you want to go there first, but if you're not, if you can't, or if you're working on it, for now, this may be some justifications to work on in the meantime. And to finish off, there's like this idea is like our ancestors didn't supplement. Well, not technically, but there's this like ancient supplements that, you could call like roots and stems and leaves, and they would make teas out of certain seeds and nuts and bark that they would find, and they would make medicinal powders and highly concentrated oil extracts. Just because it doesn't come in a pill form doesn't mean it's like a supplement necessarily, because like these could be considered like ancestral supplements that would supplement their whole food diet, our ancestors, to aid in those medicinal purposes that were ticking other boxes that they weren't getting in their day-to-day life, and that were helping in other nourishing ways for their health and well-being. So let's consider that the lifestyle of our ancestors were very different, where they're bathed in mineral springs, depending on the location, being constantly around and in dirt with their skin, which would expose them to a wide variety of prebiotics and microorganisms. Dirt wasn't really a problem if it was, around or in your food. So, there's just, it's just context, and we need to apply the context of our modern living and the individual that you or I are into this situation to work to optimize the function of this human machine today. So ultimately, supplementation is going to look to plug holes that you may not be able to plug, and is going to look to not just improve function, but to optimize function in the brain and enhance function in the brain and body. So while many would argue the brain should work fine on its own with flawless precision in the presence of clean food, pure water, sunshine, and fresh air, the reality of our modern living mostly contradicts that. Thus, it could be extremely beneficial to look to tailor the right individual supplements for you specifically based on your requirements, deficiencies, lifestyle, and context.